The fourth International Colloquium Patria continues on Tuesday in Cuba with the presentation of the documentary Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat and different workshops. In Colombia, citizens rally to support the social reforms promoted by Gustavo Petro's administration, which have been obstructed by the country's Congress. And in Palestine, the Israeli regime broke the ceasefire deal and launched heavy airstrikes against the Gaza Strip, leaving over 400 dead so far. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Havana, Cuba, the second day of the fourth edition of the International Colloquium Patria dedicated to the 20th anniversary of the news multi-platform teleSUR moves forward. The event seeks a greater integration between media outlets from the region and the world. Venezuelan Minister of Communication Freddy Ñáñez opened the second day of activities with the conference From Propaganda to Cognitive Warfare, Strategies of Resistance and Construction of Informative Autonomy, and then continued with the dialogue Culture, Communication and Geopolitics, Music as the Power of Destabilizing Processes, which was inspired by the documentary Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat by Belgian Johan Grimoff. The documentary narrates an episode of the Cold War where two U.S. musicians burst into the United Nations Security Council. During his speech at the Patria International Colloquium in Cuba, Venezuelan Communications Minister Freddy Ñáñez stated that ideology is based on manipulation of human desires.
Un éxito y ha tenido penetración el tema de las dietas o el tema de el estilo de vida, con muchísima formación. Entonces vamos a ver cómo operan estas narrativas y si es verdad lo que dice Clausel y hasta dónde llega las tesis de Clausel en términos de que también...
Central Intelligence Agency has poured into the Congo.
I don't know. Are you prepared?
ALBA movements took to X to condemn the U.S. implementation of war legislation against Venezuelan migrants. The organizations and social movements that are part of ALBA movements take a position in strong rejection of the recent joint action between the government of the United States of America and the government of El Salvador, in which 238 people were kidnapped to be imprisoned in a center for the confinement of terrorists created by President Nayib Bukele in violation of international law and the fundamental human rights of migrants. In this context, also on Tuesday, the American Association of Jurists denounced the application of laws by the U.S. government that are violating the human rights of Venezuelan migrants. In a statement, the association denounced the application of the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 against Venezuelan migrants, openly violating the fundamental principles contained in covenants, agreements, charters and conventions signed by all nations and protected by international public law. The organization adds that this law is the Nazi-fascist principle that justified the persecution and extermination of millions of people during the 20th century and throughout the 21st century. Today, the United States intends to criminalize, without due judicial and administrative process, thousands of Venezuelan migrants in order to subsequently commercialize them and transfer them as undesirable merchandise to El Salvador. The communique concludes, Venezuelans residing in the United States are victims of a migration sponsored by that same country by imposing against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela over 950 unilateral coercive measures for more than 20 years, with the sole objective of achieving a violent change of the government chosen democratically by the Venezuelan people. And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Colombia, the national government called for a day of mobilizations to support the social reforms promoted by Gustavo Petro's administration, which have been obstructed by the country's Congress. As of 9 a.m. local time, different cities in Colombia take part in rallies aimed at showing the people's rejection of the blockades against the health, pension and labor reforms. Since his inauguration, Colombian President Gustavo Petro has proposed a series of reforms that seek to improve the living conditions of millions of citizens. Among the projects promoted by the Senate, the indefinite renewal of temporary contracts, the increasing overtime pay and access to free healthcare stand out. In Ecuador, several rivers got polluted as a result of an oil spill, which contaminated the drinking water of over 500,000 locals, in addition to hampering the livelihood of fishermen in the Esmeralda's northwestern province. A landslide caused Thursday the rupture of the Trans-Ecuadorian oil pipeline, polluting rivers that supply the population and the agricultural activity of Esmeraldas, Rio Verde, Atacames, and Quindinde parishes. In this regard, the mayor of Quindinde, Ronald Moreno, reported that 600 residents had been treated for skin infections, asphyxiation, and stomachache, among other health issues. Authorities said that the oil slick has covered some 82 kilometers along rivers connecting with the ocean, so that 3 beaches had to be closed.
The oil slick has reached our shrimp sector and continues to advance and has gotten to Roca Fuerte. This is the effect that we have. Therefore, they have not been able to use the boats. As you can see, they are all stranded because they have not been able to go out to fish, as their fishing instruments had been stained and they had not pulled out any products.
In Panama, members of the People United for Life Alliance marched this Tuesday to demand the repeal of the recently approved Bill 163 on the Social Security Fund. The demonstrations will take place as of 4 p.m. local time and will go to the National Assembly to reject the government's project. Likewise, during March 19th and 20th, leafleting, picketing and partial road closures will take place throughout the country as a measure to pressure against the executive and parliament. In this sense, several social movements denounced that with a new law, the government intends to steal the resources of the Social Security Fund and hand them over to the banks and private pensions administration companies. In the United States, the New York Supreme Court filed a class action lawsuit against the crypto scam Libra promoted by Argentinian President Javier Milei. The court filing mentions the participation of President Javier Milei in the Libra case after promoting this cryptocurrency and creating an appearance of legitimacy. The lawsuit against the promoters of the crypto scam, Kelsier Ventures, Meteora and Keep Protocol, called the launch of Libra misleading, manipulative and unfair. According to analysts, the situation of the Argentine president is complicated by his implication in the scheme that allowed to defraud almost 50,000 investors with losses of up to $250 million. Russian President Vladimir Putin disclosed that exactly 28,595 sanctions are currently in place against Russian citizens and legal entities, which exceeds any number of sanctions against other countries in the world. During his speech at the plenary session of the Congress of the Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs of Russia, the president stated that in spite of the large number of Western coercive measures, national companies have been able to adapt and continue their activity. President Putin affirmed that these pressure measures seek to weaken economic and technological capabilities, but with these sanctions, Russia has strengthened its sovereignty and growth in all areas. In France, the Parisian police evicted several hundred immigrants occupying the Gare Lyrique theater building in the center of the capital. During the police operation that took place in the morning hours, the uniformed officers were confronted by several migrant rights activists who tried to prevent the eviction. According to witnesses, the police used tear gas, which caused demonstrations to be affected, and many had to receive medical attention. Despite the protesters' efforts, the police evicted 450 migrants who had occupied the theater since December 10, 2024, most of them coming from African countries. From Gemelli Hospital in Rome, Pope Francis urged for disarming words, disarming minds, and disarming the earth. On a letter published on Tuesday in the Italian Corriere della Sera daily, the pontiff highlighted that war times were becoming increasingly absurd. The Pope further asserted that there was a great need for reflection, calm, and raising awareness of the complexity. In addition, he regretted that while war has just devastated communities and the environment without providing solutions to conflicts, diplomacy and international organizations needed new life and credibility. Overall, Pope Francis has been hospitalized for 33 days due to a bilateral pneumonia, and according to the latest medical reports, he is stable and has experienced a slow and gradual improvement. In other news, the Chinese government assures that military exercises in the Taiwan Strait are a decisive response to the collusion and foreign support given to the separatist attempts in the Chinese island. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning affirmed that China's military actions are necessary, legal and justified measures to defend the country's sovereignty, security and integrity. Mao Ning also warned that separatism from Taiwan's independence is incompatible and will only lead to self-injury. In this regard, she urged the United States to honor the commitment to stop provocative actions that cross red lines. And now we have a short break coming up, a second short break before we want to invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Fana short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to From the South. Australian authorities closed 2 beaches in the South Australian state due to the sudden appearance of a suspicious foam that could be linked to fish kills and a flu outbreak at the site. White Pinga and Parsons beaches, located in the Newland Head Conservation Park, are under investigation by the Department of Primary Industries and Regions after images of dead fish were published on the beach. Local authorities disclosed to local media that over 100 surfers had several symptoms, such as coughing, eye and throat irritation, after having visited the White Pinga beach. Israel ended the ceasefire and it has so far killed 412 people in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Tuesday that he has instructed the army to resume attacks on Gaza. He claimed that this decision was due to the fact that the Hamas resistance movement has repeatedly refused to release Israeli detainees. The Gazan Civil Defense Agency announced that a series of Israeli strikes consisting of aerial bombardment and artillery fire have injured 562 people.
The war is back with more intensity than before. Last night was harder than 20,000 other nights for us and our children. What is this? It is unacceptable what is happening. Since the bombing started, we haven't been able to sleep. All our neighbors died. The poor people, they were all women. No fighters died. Those who died were women and children.
Mujeres y niños.
One of the massacres perpetrated by the Israeli regime came after bombing hundreds of displaced people's tents in Al-Mawasi, west of Khan Yunis. The attacks follow a deepening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where Israel has blocked the entry of all aid and goods for over 2 weeks. Since the onset of their genocidal campaign in October 2023, the occupation forces killed more than 48,572 citizens, most of them children and women, and injured over 112,000 people. In the United States, the White House confirmed that it was notified in advance of Israel's latest attacks on the Gaza Strip. The administration of U.S. President Donald Trump said that the regime of Benjamin Netanyahu consulted with the White House about the aggressions that occurred between the night of March 17th and the early hours of March 18th. Earlier, President Trump sent a threatening message to Hamas and its allies, saying that all those who seek to harm not only Israel but also the United States will have to pay a price. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For TeleSUR English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.